Good afternoon, everybody. If it's Tuesday, or excuse me, if it's 2 o'clock on a Wednesday, it must be time for Webinar Wednesday. As you are all aware, I am your host, Greg Epps, with the Marketing and Membership Department. And today we are going to be going over creating a transaction and creating a transaction template within Transaction Desk. Now, how today's going to work, it's going to be fairly straightforward. I'm going to go ahead and show you how the transaction template works, what all we need to do to create the template and how we're able to use it. And then we're going to close out by showing you how you can use that template to help get you started on creating transactions going forward within the system. Now, as you can see right now, we are currently on the homepage, GAMLS.com, but today we're going to spend the majority of our time here in Transaction Desk. Now, while I already have this screen up to access Transaction Desk, just remember, directly over the homepage, we're going to go over and just select our Transaction Desk icon that will go ahead and put us in the system. It's also worth noting, as usual, the webinar today is going to be, it's being recorded right now, and it'll be put up on YouTube. So if we forget anything that we discussed today, or if there's anybody in your office that you think could gain us value from today's webinar, it'll be at their disposal tomorrow. Now, with that being said, we are currently on the home page. And like I said, today, we're going to focus on creating a transaction template and then show you guys how you can create a transaction. Now, just so we're aware, a transaction template is essentially going to be a skeleton, an outline, if you will, for the transaction that you can set up. The way the system works is that it allows for you to create these templates based upon the type of transaction that you're doing. So instead of you piecemealing instead of you creating all of your transactions piecemeal one at a time, you can start a template to state that anytime that I create a transaction of this type, I want these forms, these contacts, and all this other information to be pulled into that transaction, thus saving you guys some time and the legwork of going in and piecemeal pulling all of those things in every time you create a transaction. Well, this is going to cut down on that. Okay. Now, to access it, what we're going to do is, if you notice here, I've opened up the toolbar located out to the left-hand side of the screen, and we're going to go down to the gear that says Settings. All right. Now, keep in mind, this isn't something you're going to do frequently. The beauty of setting up a template is, much like other things in the system, you do a little bit of work on the front end, so you don't have to worry about it going forward. This kind of sets up that automation that we were talking about when I originally did the Transaction Desk overview. Now, if I click on Settings, it's going to take us over to our settings screen. Now, from here, we've got several choices, which we went over before, but the one we're going to focus on today is going to be that transaction templates field that we have right there. So it's kind of dead center in the middle of all of these, actually closer to the bottom, but we're not going to be pedantic today. And so in order to create the template, we're going to go ahead and select that link, Transaction Templates. And before I go into this, let's just increase the size of the screen just a little bit so you guys can see everything. There we go. And now I'm going to select templates. Now, if you recall, there is a little bit of redundancy in the system. Not a bad thing. It's just making it easier for you to recognize how to go from point A to point B. So if you recall in the previous webinars, our transaction template screen is going to look a lot similar, or look the same as our transaction screen, which also looks the same as our digital signature screen. That's just for ease of use, so you know what you're looking at when you get there. So when you click on the transaction template screen, as you can see, I have several templates set up because I am testing them from classes, but you'll have a list of all the templates that you've created. Now, out to the right-hand side at the top here, notice it says Transaction Templates, but as we keep going to the right, we've got three icons that are going to be located here. One is going to be a funnel. That's going to allow for us to filter through our templates. As you can see, all mine, offices, and clients. And the reason why those are set up is that if your broker creates templates, they can trickle down through the office to all of the agents. So if you select office, if your broker's created any office templates, they'll show up there. If you created any yourself and you just want to find the ones that you've created, you can select mine, and that'll just pull up the ones that you've created yourself. Likewise, you guys won't really worry about clients, so I'm not going to go into them, but really the main two that you're going to deal with are the mines and the offices. Along with being able to filter out whether you're looking at your templates or the office's templates, you can also sort these templates. Now, it just gives you the option to sort by name. I know at times that we've had updates where they've added the the creation date to it, so you can do that. But generally speaking, it's just going to sort it alphabetically. Now, finally, we have that plus symbol that says add. Now, in order to create that transaction template, obviously, you probably see it coming. We're going to go ahead and click on that add button there. It's also worth noting when I hover my cursor over the plus symbol, notice it says create transaction template. So even if you're not sure where to go, if you just hover the cursor over certain icons, it's going to tell you what they can do. So I'm going to go ahead and click on the plus symbol here. From there, it's going to take us to this drop-down window, which is very similar to when we create a transaction. The only difference being when you create the transaction, it asks for you to name it and select the template. Here, we're going to create that template. So we're just going to fill this information out how we need to. Now, at the top of the screen, right off the bat, we've got ownership. Now, keep in mind, this is only going to affect those that are brokers. That'll allow for you to either create these for yourself, or once again, if you are a broker or office admin, you can create templates that will get passed around to or sent down to all of the agents within your office. In this case, we're just going to select personal because we're creating this for ourselves. Now, you can give it a name. You can name it whatever you want. The naming mechanism, along with the description, is solely for you. No one else is logging into Transaction Desk. No one else is going to see your templates. So how you define these is taster's choice, however you want to do it. So in this case, webinar, we'll do a webinar template test. Now we're going to give it a name. Under the description, this is where you're going to flesh out for your own edification what this template does. So if you have two single-family detached ones, one happens to be FHA, you can put in that it's the FHA version versus the other. But below or betwixt name and description, we've got type. Now, this is going to be where you're going to want to put in the specific type of transaction that you're going to deal with so that anytime you create that transaction, you can just select the right template. So from here, we can choose between commercial lease listing sale, condo lease listing sale, residential lease listing sale, or residential sale financing. Now, there is a way for you to customize the types through the settings field, but that'll be a webinar for another day. For right now, we're just going to focus on commercial, condo, and residential lease listing and sale. So let's say for the sake of this example that we're going to be doing a residential listing. So we know that this is what we're going to be creating. Let me go ahead and put residential listing. So we all know what we're working with. So this is a webinar residential listing template test. It's a whole lot of words there that I didn't need to type. And the type that we're going to be using is residential listing. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and saving it is going to create the template. So this is going to set up the skeleton that we're going to flesh out with our transactions. Now from here, you may notice 1, 2, 3, we've got 6 steps. 6 steps to create the template. Now, keep in mind the template is going to be just that outline that you're going to use to build the transaction upon. So you can use this as much or as little as you want. Step 1 is going to be the detail, which, as you can see, we've already covered because that was the initial drop-down window. So we've named it. We've determined what type of transaction it's going to be. Now, likewise, below that, we have checklists. Now, I've touched on this before. Checklists really aren't are used heavily within our system simply because most of our members belong to offices where either the broker or whoever's in charge of the agents there has some sort of checks and balances put in place so that everybody knows all the things that they need to get from point A to point B to closing a transaction within their office. But if you are one of our users who does make or take advantage of checklists, or if you use them, you can enter them in here so that once you get started on that transaction, it's automatically going to pull those up. And just to give you an example, I don't know. Oh, I do have some. We're going to go ahead and select one. We'll go with how to listen to Webinar Wednesday and make that our checklist. I'm going to go ahead and click add. Now, keep in mind, if you didn't have a checklist to create, you could go ahead in that section and create that checklist if need be. It's also worth noting, if you notice now that I've added my checklist here, out to the right-hand side, there is a trash can. I bring this up because this is not a static template, meaning you can go in and you can make changes if need be. So you do have the ability to delete that and move on and add other stuff if need be. Now, below that, we have contacts. Now, this is going to be the section where you can add contacts. Now, I know normally when I show this, the first question I get is, Greg, how do I speculatively know what contacts I'm going to need for a particular transaction? Great question, and I completely understand that it depends on a case-by-case basis as to who you work with on the other side of that table, along with the clients that you have. Now, one thing that you can do when we go over to the right-hand side and click on that plus symbol for add contact, it gives us the choice to create a new contact, to add an existing contact, or to create an empty contact space. So what I always recommend is when you're getting started, even if you don't know the people that are going to be involved in this transaction, if you know the roles that the people are going to fill, you can go ahead and add those now. So what will happen is if I go ahead and let's say I click create empty contact, I can select from all of these: appraisal company, buyer, lawyer, condo, HOA, escrow company, whatever I need. Let's say in this case, I know I'm going to need a lawyer. So I can go ahead and select lawyer. And when I click save, that's going to save the lawyer contact associated with the transaction template. So whenever I create a transaction using this template, it's already going to have a place for me to put the lawyer's information in for me. So just an easy way for you to get placeholders to get all your ducks in a row when setting up that transaction. Now, below that, we've got the next two here. This is going to be documents and folders and forms. Now, for those of you that are unaware, the difference between the two, because they do kind of seem like they go hand in hand, are going to be as such. Documents and folders are going to be those documents and or items that you are going to pull in that belong to, let's say, your office. If your office has any special documents or forms that you need to add to a transaction, you can add those into the documents and folder section. Basically, anything that isn't a GAR or RE form would go under documents and folders. Now, likewise, if I go down to forms and I click plus to add, it's going to take me over to that same screen where I would add in the GAR forms or the RE forms. So your documents and folders are going to be office-specific items that you're going to add to your template. Your forms are going to be those contract forms that you would pull in from either GAR or the RE forms. Now, in this case, since I am not an active realtor, I don't have those GAR forms, but I do have the RE forms that I'll go ahead and click on. So, and we're not really going to fill out any of these documents today. This is just an example to show you how the placeholders work. So what I can do is as I go through here, let's say I know for every residential transaction that I'm going to do that my office requires me, and I know I'm selecting ones that have nothing to do with anything. Actually, let's get diverse here and pull in other things. I know that I'm going to need these 12 forms. Now, realistically speaking, you may not need all 12 forms, but I always say add all of the forms to the transaction that you may need. It's a lot easier for you to remove those forms from that transaction than it is for you to piecemeal to go back and add them after the fact. So really easy. Go through the forms here, select them. When you're done, as you can see, it'll give you a count in the basket, and I can just click add. And now I've successfully added all of those documents to this transaction. Now, what this means is when we go in and we create the transaction after using this template, it's going to pull in that checklist that we added. It's going to pull in our contacts. In this case, I just added the lawyer, so it's going to allow for us to pull in that lawyer field there. And while I skipped over the documents and folders, under the forms, we have all of these forms that I've pulled in from the RE forms. So anytime I create a transaction using this template, it's automatically going to pull in that lawyer. It's automatically going to pull in that checklist, and it's automatically going to pull in all of these forms that I've associated with that transaction template directly into the transaction by me just clicking the button. Okay. Now, along with that, the final one that we have here is teams and sharing. Now, the way teams and sharing work, let's say you're on a team or you work with someone closely or close enough that they actually take a look at your transactions and documents. This also works if you have an assistant in our system. You can add them as well. Once you add that share over, what it does, if I just go ahead and add that and click save, is that adds that team to this template. So anytime I create a transaction using this template, it's going to let me know. There we go. I do have the share there. It's not only going to pull in our checklists, our contacts, if we have any documents or forms, it's also going to pull in if we have any teams or any sharing that we need to. So once we've completed this, we've finished the template. So I can close all of these up and we are good to go. We've added all the things that we need to do. So now we're going to move on to create a transaction. Now, what we're going to do in this part of the webinar is I'm going to show you there are 3 essential ways that you can go about creating a transaction in Transaction Desk. And each way, I'll show you how you can incorporate the transaction template into that transaction creation. All right. So moving along, we're going to go up to the top of the screen again. And I'm going to go over here to our transaction screen, which is that second option that we have here. So I'm going to go ahead and click on transactions. It's going to give me my list of all the transactions that we have, but as we mentioned before, we're not going to work on a transaction. We're going to create one. So the first way for you to go ahead and create a transaction into Transaction Desk is, I call it the neat way, the straight up way. We're going to go over here. If you remember, much like we saw when we were looking at the template screen, we can just go over to that plus symbol that says add. If I click on that, it's going to take us to the creation screen. Now notice, much like when we had the template, it gives us a drop-down window. Now what I can do here is I can give it a name. The very next choice that I have is I can go in and I can select the template that I've created. Now in this case, I've got that webinar residential listing template test that we used. So I'm going to select that. Now we've got our import data. Now this is where we have the divergence where you can of the options and how you approach creating that transaction. Because let's say we're dealing with a property that we're in the process. We're creating a CMA for. We're going to do the listing presentation in hopes of getting the listing. We don't have it in the service yet, but we want to get all of our ducks in a row and create a transaction folder in the event that we do. In that case, you wouldn't use the import data source. We'll do that. We'll save that for the next one around. And we're just going to go into the transaction. Because remember that listing or the transaction is based on a property that's not in our service. So if I go to create, it tells me a new transaction has been created, and it takes us over to our transaction creation screen. Now this is a 5-step process. Notice it says details, step 1 of 5. So the first step we've got here is going to be listing information pertaining, listing details pertaining to the listing that we're incorporating into this transaction. I can fill this out in its entirety. If I need to, I can save and exit, come back, fill it out at a later date. The next step is going to be for us to put in our transaction dates, which I will do the same, enter that in manually. Now notice the next step we have here is our contact section. Well, I had myself listed as the list agent, so it's going to show me as the list agent. It's going to show George MLS as the list broker because that's the company I work for. But notice at the very top, we've got lawyer with the edit field here. So that was pulled in from that template. So now all I have to do to add the lawyer is click on that edit button and I can fill out my lawyer's information right there. Okay. Now the next step, step 4, because remember we're already in step 3 of 5, so it's very easy to get started on that transaction. It's going to take us over to those forms. Well, just like we touched on before, since I created that template and I already incorporated all of those forms into that template, they've already been pulled into this document for me. Now, if I'm in a situation where I don't need all of these forms, I can simply click on those 3 windows there, or the 3 circles out to the right-hand side. And if I need to, I can delete them. You also have the ability to add a mandatory lock. So if you are a broker or a team leader and you want to create a template and add it so that anytime for that transaction it can't be removed, you can mandatorily lock that down. All right, now, like I mentioned, we're on step 4, which is those forms. Had I had any documents, those would have been pulled in as well. And they're going to show up here under step 5, which is the documents. Now, as you can see here, it creates the fact spec cover sheet. And even though we didn't add that to the documents, it's worth noting that anytime you create a transaction in Transaction Desk, it's always going to create that fact spec cover sheet. That is just makes it easier for the people that you're going to send this information off to be able to send you documentation back to you and have it go directly into Transaction Desk. So with that being said, now keep in mind, I skipped over the actual manual entry of steps 1 and 2 for the dates and the general detail information, but that's going to be your workflow to create that transaction. Now, as you can see, right from doing it that way, adding that template or taking the time to create the template, it's going to save you a lot of time, because if you've got any documents, it's already going to pull those in. Like we noticed in the previous step there, it's already going to pull in all of the forms that you have. So if you take the time to gather up all of the forms that you know you may need for that particular type of transaction, this is going to save you the time of having to piecemeal enter those in every single time you create one. All right. Now, I know I showed you guys how to do it straight up, just to go in and manually enter everything for a transaction. But let's take a look at the other ways that we can do that to maybe help speed things along a bit. All right. So I'm going to go back over here to our transaction folder. We're going to click on plus again. Now we're going to do a very similar workflow. We're going to give it a name. We're going to select our template. Now, the one difference is instead of just going directly into the transaction, instead, this time I'm going to go up here to where it says import data. It is optional, but I'm going to select my source, which is going to be Georgia MLS. And then notice it opens this up for us. Now, I can select for property types. Now, being that we're doing a residential listing template test, I'm going to select, stick with single family detached. But if I happen to have the list number, I can enter in that MLS number right here. Now, when I enter this in, the next step, it says add me as. I can be added as a list agent, the selling agent, neither or both. In this case, I'm going to put neither, just because I am neither the buying nor the selling agent. And I just want you guys to see what it's going to look like. It'll actually pull in the list agent information for you. And I'm always going to put the check in the checkbox there to use the wizard, because that was that steps 1 through 5 that we just walked through. So now that I've filled everything out, the only difference is I've actually added the property type and the list number for that particular listing that I want to create a transaction for. And now I'm going to click create. Of course, I need to learn my numbers. No whammies, no whammies, no whammies. By the way, you guys are feel free to ask a question if you've got any. Being that my computer is apparently slower than sin today, I'll have time to answer it. There we go. All right. Just needed to find the proper list number. Now, a couple of things to point out that you may notice right off the bat that are a little different from when we were going to manually enter in the information. Since I pulled in this listing information directly from the MLS, you can see we've got our list number here. We've got our address here. It also puts in the subject photo that's associated with that property. But if you notice below that, instead of me having to fill out all the details, all of the listing information has been pulled in directly from the MLS. So I don't have to fill out the details page. I mean, I can add extra information if I notice it hasn't been filled out, but it's going to pull in all of that listing information, including comments, directly from the MLS. Moving on to step 2, notice that it adds those transaction dates as well. If I go over to step 3, which is going to be the contacts, notice that it has the actual agents in office that are associated with that listing. So when you go in, so long as you put appropriately who you are or which side of the table you're on, it'll put the other person in for you. Like we did the last time, since I've already created I'm using the template and I've already pulled in all those forms, it's going to pull in all those forms for me. And then finally, we've got our FaxPack cover sheet. So just to reiterate, we're piggybacking on the traditional sense of you going in and manually entering in all this information. Because now, if you're in Transaction Desk, you can simply put in the list number, select your template, and it's going to pull in all the listing information from Paragon, and it's going to pull in all of the transaction template information from the template that you just created. Makes it a lot easier for you to get started. All right. Now, we're going to go the third way. So I'm going to back out of here one more time. We're going to have a clean screen and we're going to create a new template. So to do so, whereas before we went in and we manually entered it, we're not going to create a new template, a new transaction, sorry. The first way was to go in and manually enter in all of the listing information to create the template or to create the transaction. The second way is for you to go in and put in a list number in the transaction creation screen, so it'll pull in all of the listing information. Now, the third way is directly from Paragon. Let's say we're in a search like I am right now. We're looking at all of our listings. Let's say I see a listing that I like. I say, this is the listing for me. This is exactly what my client needs. I'm going to create a transaction on this property right now. So what I can do is directly from Paragon. Most people don't realize we have a series of icons located next on the quick action icons that are located on the one-line report for all of your search results. There is a Transaction Desk icon. I'm not sure if you can see that. Let me make this a little bigger. Oh no, that is big. All right. So we've got our transaction desk icon here. It's the little royal blue icon with it looks like bars that are moving in a clockwise. Anyways, if I click on that icon, all I got to do is click on it. It's going to open up Transaction Desk. It's going to log me into Transaction Desk, and it takes me directly to that transaction screen. So as you can see right here, it already gives me the name, which is the address, which you can change to whatever you want. It already has the import data from the MLS along with the property type and the list number. Got myself listed as neither because I am neither in the transaction. So all I have to do now is scroll down and select my template. I do that, click create. And just like we did a step ago, it's going to pull in all of the information that we had from the template. It's going to take that listing information that we just pulled in off of Paragon by clicking on that link, and it's going to create a brand new transaction for us. So just like we did before, notice that we've got our subject photo here. We've got all of our listing information pulled in from Paragon. We scroll through. It's going to have our dates. It's going to pull in all of the people that are associated with the document. I thought I selected neither. I'm wondering why that's there. And then as we move through, as you can see, we've got our forms, and that fax back cover sheet is going to be listed under documents. Now, just so we're aware, if we ever run into a situation like this where it puts in people that it shouldn't, in this case, if I want to remove myself and Georgia MLS as the list agent, all I have to do is go over to the right to those three circles. And from here, I can either edit that contact, or I can just delete that contact from this transaction, and then we're good to go. Once you're done, all you have to do is click save and exit, and you've successfully created a transaction in Transaction Desk. Now, at any point in time, if you need to refer back to that transaction, all you have to do is, well, depends. 9 times out of 10, it should show up right here, as you can see, 495 Southwest Bend Avenue. It puts it all in chronological order. So the most recent transactions should show up on your dashboard there. But if your dashboard doesn't look like mine does, you can always go up to the top left portion of the screen, click on that little hamburger button. That's what they call it, not me. And you can select transactions. Now from transactions, that's going to take you to your overall list. You could sort by, I have last modified. I'm going to sort by date created. And it's going to, oh, well, why aren't you giving me my... Oh, never mind. I apologize, guys. I didn't actually save or create any or save them listed as active because I think I'm only looking at... that's what it is. I'm only looking at closed listings. So I'm going to go over here to active. And did I break the system? I hope not. Anyway, while this loads, and the only reason why I'm loading it here is just so you can actually see that your transactions will show. Oh, I have no empty. Let's try open as well. But yeah, there we go. So I said active instead of open. But so long as you have it set so that you're pulling in all of your open lists or transactions, they should rise right to the top, just like they will on your dashboard. And just like that, that is how in Transaction Desk you can go in and create a template and then use that template to create a transaction, whether it's you manually entering it in, whether you enter in the list number in Transaction Desk under the drop-down window, or if you want, you can simply click on the Transaction Desk icon located right off of the listing in Paragon to create the transaction that way. And that's that. It's just that easy, guys. Now, I know from all the classes that I've taught that about this time, or I should say in about 15 minutes, you're going to think back on today's webinar and you're going to say to yourself, I don't remember 90% of what he said. How do I get this information? So just so we're aware, if you want to go back over this, I will have this up on YouTube. You can access it by simply going to Georgia MLS under YouTube. But if you happen to be in Transaction Desk itself, if you click on the little question mark that's located in the bottom here that says help, we've got a whole series of support that Transaction Desk has. We have help videos. We've got training guides. There are even pre-recorded webinars and live support. If I click on these, notice here I went over to the help videos. If I go to transactions, notice that we have create a transaction with a template. So we've already got a video in Transaction Desk waiting for you right there. Along with that, we have the same thing when you're over here working with transactions in our text base, create a transaction template. And what that does is it's just a text-based document that you could even print off that will provide you with all of the information that you need to get from point A to point B to creating that template. I recommend create one for yourself. It's not going to affect anything because a lot of this information is internal until you send it out to someone to be signed with digital signatures. So feel free to create a transaction template, save it just to see how it works. And yeah, if you have any questions, guys, feel free to ask now. Otherwise, I know we'll be coming back next week with finishing up the Transaction Desk series. So I'll show you guys how to do a digital signature. But yeah, that's how you create a template and then go in and create a transaction within Transaction Desk. Do you guys have any questions? All right. Well, in that case, I'm glad I was able to get this under the wire today. I know the previous webinars were a little long, but I hope this was helpful for you guys. And as I say about this time, please go forth and sell a couple $1 million worth of homes. Hope you guys are all staying safe out there. Thank you very much for tuning in today. Have a great one. Thanks.